I definitely respect the concern about the roof runoff. I do want to keep in mind that a lot of that water is going into a wooded area too, just to note. But certainly would be a benefit to have some kind of mitigation, I guess, for the roof runoff. But the fact that it's going into a wooded area and not it, I wouldn't expect a lot of erosion, I guess is what I'm saying, for that 16 by 16. But any mitigation that can be provided is certainly a benefit. But given that, I'm not terribly concerned because of what that existing, makeup of the riverfront area close to the proposed deck is. So.
I'd like to make a comment. The roof, just so you know, is split so that the runoff will equally split off on all four sides. So a quarter of it will go to each side. So it's not gonna like favor any one side of the roof.
Thank you.
Or the lawn.
Brian, when you were mentioning dry wells, what did you have in mind? Something along each side of the porch?
Yeah, almost like a riprap to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it would need to be almost as significant as a true dry well. Just more of a diffusion device to way to kind of break it up so it doesn't really start pounding that flat lawn and seeping.
Right.
I think that would be, again, just because where the area is and how flat and where it's situated, I don't think it would be much of an issue.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Would river rock suffice around it? We have that on the perimeter of our existing house under the drip line around the perimeter.
I think, yeah, something like that would sound sufficient, especially as you explained that it is the 4-quartered roof. So it's not half down one side, half down the other. That something like that, just to diffuse what's coming off that roof, kind of lessen that impact. I think that would suffice. I mean, I think that would be fine for me. I'm curious, Rebecca, if you have thoughts.
I don't. I think the commission's covered it, and actually the applicant just answered my question. I was just going to ask a clarification on what you were describing, and that in fact it was the drip edge and putting some rock or gravel along the edge.
Okay. I should ask, are there any members of the public here tonight to have any comments or questions? Nope. All right. Seeing none, any further questions or comments from members of the commission? Okay. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for 119 for a request for determination of applicability for 119 Sampson Road. Do I hear a second for closing?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Emily?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am, and I myself. All right. I'd like to make a motion that we issue a -3 determination for 119 Sampson Road with the following conditions. That a crushed rock or gravel border along the drip line be placed at the end of construction. And that all building materials be stockpiled either on the driveway or outside of the resource area as best as possible. Do I hear? Yes, go ahead, Jem.
Excuse me, would you amend the crushed rock or gravel to the downslope regions of the drip line? Does that make sense?
I see, so not the ones close to the house?
Yeah, because the ones going this way, it'll be able to percolate underneath the deck and yeah.
When you say downslope, can you give me a
that would be
direction?
That would be north and east.
Okay.
Brian, you could also say areas between the structure or the side of the structure closest to the resource area.
Okay.
Whichever works.
You think I can say that if I can remember that. All right, so I will strike that prior motion, and instead I'll make a motion that we have a -3 determination for 119 Sampson Road with the following conditions: that a crushed rock or gravel, I apologize, a crushed rock or gravel border be placed along the drip line of the resource facing sides, particularly the north and eastern, both north and east sides of the deck, and that all building materials be stockpiled either on the driveway or outside the resource area as best as possible. Do I hear a second for that?
A second.
All right, all those in favor, Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well. And thank you to the Wheelers. Good luck with the deck and with everything.
Thank you, Mr. Berube. We can start in 10 days. Is that true, assuming there are no appeals to this decision?
You can start 10 days after all the signatures have been, so the mailing date is the issuance date. So today the commission took the vote, the mailing date or hand delivery date. So I can do that as well. I can contact you once we've received all the signatures from commission members that were here this evening. And so I can call you, come in and pick it up, or I will mail it. And that is the issuance date. So then from that date, 10 days, then you can start. Some individuals may start at their discretion between now and then, or they reach out to DEP prior to the start of work to see if DEP has any special interest in this project within that 10-day appeal period. And sometimes they say, no, there's not a substantial concern for this site. Other times they may say yes, but that's typically what people have done in the past.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Hey, thank you all.
Have a good night.
Yes, thank you.
Merry Christmas. Take care. Bye now.
Yep. So we're checking out.
All right. And Rebecca, you ready for me to move on?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
going to reshare my screen momentarily so you can start on the next
Okay.
one.
So the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing for a notice of intent under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, for a notice of intent filed for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75. Say, do we have an update? But I think we can see it on screen. They are awaiting a response from the tree warden from some of the questions we had at last meeting, and it looks like they have requested a continuation. Rebecca, can you remind me, when is our next meeting, or did we settle on a next meeting date?
Yep, our next meeting date is January 4th.
Okay.
And I believe we're at 7:45.
7:45. Okay.
Yep.
All right. That said, I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for notice of intent for Century Mill Road, map 3.D, parcel 75 until our next public hearing, Tuesday, January 4th at 7:45 p.m. Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. So next up, the Conservation Commission will continue the hearing for, the discussion for a request for a certificate of compliance for 285 Still River Road, DEP file number 112-600. Rebecca, is there an update?
There is. So Emily, I'm going to touch base on your comment first, Brian, if that's okay. I received an email
Perfectly
from
fine.
Emily that she had not yet seen the plans. Sorry, this is kind of, I did email this to Emily. And essentially, so this is 285 Still River. You can see the driveway here to the left of your screen comes out on Still River Road. There is the approximate stream bank here, which is visible from the roadway. There's another driveway below here to another home right on the brook. So this is up gradient from the stream bank and brook. You have your 200-foot riverfront area here towards the right of your screen. And this is the work area, which was the deck and the covered deck. And then the mulch bed is here and up here. And here is where they planted the lilies. There were some lilies. The only difference between the original and the as-built here is, can you see my mouse? We're moving
Yes.
it? Okay. So the lilies originally were proposed in this area. This is all lawn at this point and it's stable. So when Carol was still working here, she went out and took a look and they had moved the lilies up here. She was comfortable with that at the time. I'm also comfortable. I went out, the lilies obviously are not in season right now, but you can see remnants of them. When I was out on site, this was just yesterday afternoon. So I wanted to get back out there when we received this request for certificate of compliance. And there's another mulch bed here. There were native blueberries required to be planted. The applicant and their consultant have stated that the deer have been impacting those. So I think what I would suggest to the commission, as the mulch bed is still there, you can see that these were planted and they've just failed. An ongoing condition could be to replant and just have a native shrub that is resistant to deer, which is difficult, but I think that's appropriate where the current homeowner and any new homeowner will be able to plant that area still with something that's acceptable by the Conservation Commission and understand that that was part of the permit in the beginning.
Yep. What would you call that if we were to put an ongoing condition? What would you refer to that area as?
I would call it a mitigation area or restoration area. The reason why I think I would lean more towards mitigation is it's because of the mulch bed. It's not restored to the what was there originally, but it's still serving the purpose regarding the performance standards. So that's why I would say mitigation.
All right. Is there a specific locale for that? Were there multiple mitigation areas on site?
There were two. So this area here, which was the bed, planting bed, and then here.
Yeah. So is that the, let's say, what, westernmost or?
Let me zoom out.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Probably the
northernmost.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I kind of cut you off with that. Did you have a chance to address Emily's question?
So Emily's question was just what was the original plan, and then within this as-built too, I believe. So
yeah,
Emily,
I was looking at the original plan that specifically called out the mitigation area and what had been approved as plantings, because I had some concerns with the planting area and for several reasons. One, the fact that the shrubs aren't sustaining, that was concerning to me. And I kind of was curious as to what the intent was, as you just asked, Brian. Was this a mitigation area? Is this a restoration area? If it was supposed to kind of naturalize, I'm really confused as to why mulch was put down. And it was like that red dyed mulch. And I saw the photos in the packet. If the intent is for this area to naturalize, I'd really like to see the mulch taken out of there, quite frankly. It looks like it was placed twice. It was placed once and then they replanted and had more mulch spread. So if it's supposed to naturalize and restore, then I really think that we ought to get the mulch out of there and let that naturalize. And it didn't look like the plantings were native that were put in, honestly. There was catmint, daylilies, which are not native and super invasive, beautiful, but not native. And then the catmint, and then something else was put in. And then the low bush blueberries, it wasn't clear if those were native or not, but they came from a nursery that had all non-native plantings. So my guess is that they're not native. And I don't know as a commission if we should request that if these are not sustaining, we just, as Rebecca had noted earlier, we ask that something else gets put in, whether it's winterberry, high bush blueberries, something, the mulch gets taken out, we let the area naturalize. So that was just, those were kind of my, as I was going through the documents that came through, those were kind of my my concerns and questions.
I think all of those are very valid. To my understanding, it was not naturalized, and I don't believe at that time it was specified to have native plantings. And I know that's something, again, that I talked about with the applicant's representative on site and said, you know, maybe that's something that would have been more beneficial for not only the area there and the performance standards, but maybe they'd be a little bit more resistant depending on the species. Because while we were out there, obviously they were relayed that what was planted, and like you said, clearly had been replanted again, and they had since failed. So I would 100% agree with that. And I would say an ongoing condition should specify that it's native species. The other thing too that I included in the packet was the emails and correspondence from Carol that the applicant's representative also included. She was my predecessor and she was comfortable with the work that had been done at that time. But again, since then the plantings have failed and the site is stable though. So that was my feedback while I was on site. And I'm happy to hear that Emily, just from reading the documents and seeing the pictures, saw similar findings, it sounds like.
I think that, you know, if we can't go back in time and the daylilies are stable. I'm not looking to say, hey, you've got to rip those out and put native plantings in. But if we have this planting bed in the north area that is not stable, or I shouldn't say stable, if the plantings are not sustaining, then I think that if we are going to issue a certificate of compliance, we should bring that area up to compliance and propose a planting that will be more hardy and won't get attacked by the deer. I haven't seen, we have high bush blueberries out behind our house. And we have deer. I've never seen them get killed by the deer. So that's why I'm kind of curious if these blueberry bushes are native, or if there's something hardier that we could propose or suggest. And I would definitely like to request that the red mulch get taken out and just let that area kind of naturalize a bit along the tree line.
Would you be comfortable doing that with an ongoing condition? If we were to issue the certificate of compliance with the ongoing condition that, and then get into that mitigation area? Or would you prefer that, you know, to kind of propose the changes we'd like to see and then have them come back and reapply for or re-ask for the certificate?
Well, it looks like the house is being sold. So I don't know how real, I mean, they can't plant anything now. How do we ensure that that gets carried over to the buyer?
There's a statement at the end of every order of conditions that states that when I'm paraphrasing, but when a new owner comes into fruition or purchases the property, essentially they provide an affidavit or a statement to the commission saying, we understand, and obviously the buyer knows that this is recorded on the registry of deeds, and we receive a statement saying they're aware of the order of conditions and therefore they're aware of the ongoing conditions, and in that same statement that it requires them to submit information of new ownership or change of property, it also states that they're responsible to be in compliance with the order and any ongoing conditions. So it's really just made right into both on the state side and our local bylaw order of conditions.
Okay. I mean, I'd be comfortable with that as long as it's carried over to the new buyer and that they're responsible for following up with this once it's planting season again. I don't want to be unrealistic. These folks are trying to sell their home. I don't really think it's, I mean, it stinks. They did try, they
Yes,
did
yeah.
try several times. It's not like they just didn't do it. So to be fair and reasonable, I'm totally comfortable with that as long as it gets carried over to the buyer and the work is performed by the buyer come springtime. I would be fine with that.
The only thing I'm gonna have to look back into the order of conditions for is regarding the removal of that mulch, because if that was part of the original request by the commission at that time, we can't say to remove it, but I think certainly the commission can still say allowed to naturalize with those plantings, and that may be more appropriate and suitable to match with the prior commission's decision as well.
That's it, because
The other issue with the mulch too, is that a lot of native plants, I mean, mulch is so, people put mulch on all their planting beds, and mulch is good for some plants and not good for other plants. It really is dependent on what kind of water needs they have.
Yep.
And widely mulching beds is not beneficial to plants in general, unless that plant specifically needs a mulch. So in order to have a planting bed be successful, it's really dependent on what you have planted there if you're going to mulch it and what you're mulching it with. And I definitely agree, Rebecca, if that was in the original order of conditions, that is just what we have to go with. But I'm kind of hoping that it was just something that was added by the owner thinking we're going to mulch the garden bed, and it can just come out. I'm not a fan of mulch personally anyway, but I just think it is very specific to certain plantings. And, depending on what ends up going in there, it might not benefit those plants in the long run. So if it's okay, and that was in the order of conditions, then that makes sense. But
I'm with you. I'm not a fan of mulching, and like
It
you
just
said,
will-
over
I
mulching.
agree.
and
But in any,
if it needs to naturalize too, it won't naturalize with the mulch for a really long time either until that mulch breaks down. So it really depends on what the initial intent was.
So a suggestion then would talk about the native plantings, and then so there's 8. So 8 native shrubs. And the other suggestion would be the language of naturalizing. And if the commission wants to add in the note about the mulch, that's okay too. But I think the applicant would have the ability, the property owner would have the ability to make that call as well. Because if the plants fail again, they're going to realize they need to brush it out or, rake it out. Or if the species they put in there and they have a landscaper do it, the landscaper is going to make that decision too and probably spread it out a little bit, which allows more vegetation to get through.
Yeah.
But I think definitely the commission has the ability, and it follows what was previously conditioned with the native vegetation and then allowing it to naturalize.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would tend to agree too, because the other thing is, if you said Carol went out on site and was okay with the general plan as it stood, if they were told that, and two, Carol was generally very good, so I'm sure it would have followed along with what was allowed for in the plans, I'm guessing, because I think that predates me, but
Mm-hmm.
all right. Other commission members have thoughts?
Nope, I'm all set, Brian.
Okay. Anybody here from the public to comment on this evening, Rebecca?
Yeah, excuse me, Bruce Ringwald.
Bruce is here. He is the representative for the applicant.
Hey, Bruce, any questions or comments, please?
As Rebecca said, they are in the process of selling the property. I had taken a look at a couple different options, and I agree with Emily, something like a winterberry or a northern bayberry that would be more deer resistant, and also native would be a good supplement to go in there. The biggest issue here is obtaining a certificate of compliance and getting the release of the bond. There's been a $4,000 bond that's been held since whenever this began. I can't remember, 2012 or 13, whenever it was. So I didn't know if you guys were going to be voting on that as well.
I was going to say we don't have it on our agenda for this evening. Usually it's done separately, Rebecca. If I remember correctly, it has to be it gets requested separately, I think.
So typically what the commission has done is they have issued if they're going to issue a certificate of compliance, they issue that certificate of compliance. And then when that certificate is recorded, then the request can come forward to release the bond.
Okay.
Other questions?
Are you looking to vote for a certificate of compliance this evening?
Yes. Well, most likely I'm going to put it out there. We'll see what the commission members have to say, but yeah, I don't have any other questions. I haven't heard other questions from the commission. And Rebecca, I don't think anybody else in the public is here to comment tonight.
I did not see anyone else.
Okay. See if this will work. So I would like to make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance with the following ongoing conditions: that the northernmost mitigation area be replanted with at least 8 native shrubs as resistant to deer as possible. And that going forward, it should be filled with only native plantings in that mitigation area. And that mulching should cease and the area should be allowed to naturalize to the extent possible. Do I hear a second for that motion?
I second that, Brian.
Okay.
Give it to Bill. Give it to Bill.
Perfectly fine. I just want to say, Emily, were there any conditions I was missing or anything?
I don't think
Okay.
so. I
All
mean,
right.
the other conditions that were in there, which were regarding no use of chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, those will continue through, right? Those were in the original order of conditions.
Correct.
Okay. So as long as everything is carrying through from that, I am good with what you stated.
Okay.
To the next owner. That's where my concern lies, is where we change hands, making sure that information is relayed to
So
the.
it's passed down.
Yeah.
And it should be. All right. So we have a motion. It has been seconded. All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am, and I myself.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good night. Okay. Rebecca, where would you like to move on to Trail Committee, or? Well, I should say, did commission members have a chance to review the minutes? And if so, any edits, updates, changes, or questions? And if not, does anybody need more time to read the minutes? Hearing nothing, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our December 7th, 2021 meeting as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Emily,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am, and I as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am ready for the next item if you would like.
I would greatly appreciate that.
So we do have some representatives from the special interest group of the Bolton Trails Committee. They have, so before I have them give a summary of their proposal, I do want to just highlight that this evening is solely for the purpose of the Conservation Commission considering the authorization of the submittal of these 3 notices of intent drafted by this particular group. The reason why I'm highlighting that is because it is a notice of intent. So all this evening is doing is requesting that the commission consider the authorization so that the special interest group can move forward to submit the notice of intent. And with that, they will also be working to apply for a grant. And these projects are proposed on the Conservation Commission managed properties owned by the town of Bolton. So those documents will need to be signed off by the town. But again, the commission needs to authorize it. So when I bring it to the town administrator, or if the chair needs to sign it, once I figure out that aspect, we can move forward versus having either party say, well, I don't know what the entirety of the commission thinks about these projects. In summary, you have before you, there are 9 crossings in total that are proposed and are proposed so that they shall not impede the flow of water in areas where existing trails cross. So primarily, all of these are replacement of existing crossings or boardwalks. One is being proposed at Annie Moore, or one of the properties is at Annie Moore, one property is Randall Vinger, and then Vaughan Hills. And next to them, you see the number of crossings at each of those properties. So, Mr. Chair, if you would like, I will share the summary that I had sent to you. And then Cynthia can provide a summary, if that's okay, of each slide.
That would be excellent if Cynthia is willing.
You can call me Cindy, otherwise I'm gonna think I'm in trouble.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. Okay, so I think we had discussed all right, so the problem statement is that in our town, we have miles of beautiful conservation land. The problem is that we have some bridges that are in need of replacement. Some are narrow, slippery, broken. There are a few over streams with a 5 or 6 foot drop that don't have curbs or railings. So this project started as a equestrian bridge project. And as we surveyed the bridges and looked around town, we realized that it's more than that. And I have pictures later on of the bridges, but yeah, we don't have to spend a lot of time. So here's pictures of some of the bridges. The first one on the left there, that's Barge Connector. That we found out is in Harvard. So I reached out to the Harvard folks to see if they wanted to collaborate on that. And they're looking into it. And all the bridges here, these aren't all the bridges that we're proposing. We're only proposing 9 at first. But if you keep going, so these are just some examples of the bridges. Some of the ones I'm proposing are in here, but I have more detailed projects, more detailed information further down. So yeah, so these are the ones here. You can see these are some of our worst off ones. As you can see, 7 in Vaughan Hills, 1 in Annie Moore, and 1 in Vinger. So if we go down a little, let's look at Vaughan Hills. There's actually 8 bridges in Vaughan Hills that probably will need to be replaced, but we're only doing 7 because one of them leads to the west side of the beaver pond, and that trail is not really all that stable, and there's another way around anyway, so we really don't want many people over there anyways. You can see I've numbered the bridges here. I think you're probably familiar with these bridges, but especially like see that number 7, that's like a 5 or 6 foot drop, and it's actually tilted. So I don't think anyone's arguing the fact that these bridges need to be replaced. So 7 here in Vaughan Hills, and then if we go down, we can see Annie Moore. Any questions on Vaughan Hills, or feel free to stop me if you do. Okay, Annie Moore, there's actually So this one here that you see, this one is, I think, one of our worst ones. There's this, and then past this, there's another one that goes up. I didn't include that because it's a newer bridge. And I figured we could save that for a later phase. And then down as you get towards Bolton Woods Way, there's another one that's also, but it's like, it seems newer. So I figured we just focus on this one first because this is kind of a big project. And this is definitely the worst one. You can see what it looks like right now. And this is just, you know, replacing the same bridge in the same place. Okay, and then if we go down to Vinger, so in Vinger, we have this bridge. We call it the Adventure Bridge. It's a little bit dangerous. Well, it's for people that want adventure, it's fine. You have to go up and down, and it's really slippery. So what we realized is if you're going from Randall down and you go and you'll see Rocky Dundee on your left, there's actually like a totally clear path over here on the right that leads down to a much smaller crossing. I think it could just be like 16 feet at most, whereas this is very long and extensive. And it's clear on both sides. There's only one down tree on the south side. And I'm not sure if I have more pictures in there, but we looked. So Gordon helped us look, and he went down to the new proposed crossing, and he found with GPS that it does appear to be in the conservation area. So the idea is to leave that where it is, where there's already a clear trail going down to the narrower part of the stream. Just put another bridge down there for people that don't want to go on this. And it's really not going to need any clearing or anything like that. So this is a new location. So I'm assuming it would need additional, you know, reconnaissance to make sure that it was permitted properly and all that. Let's go down. So that's Vinger. And then I think we talked about this last time, but I included a diagram of each proposed solution for each bridge. And as we mentioned before, it's this FRP solution. This is becoming increasingly popular due to its long lifespan. It's, I think, a little bit more expensive than using wood, but you don't have to replace it for another 75 years. As I mentioned, you can see there's a grid on top. And what we do is we fill that with pea stone. The pea stone embeds itself, so it's not going to be loose and coming out. It's pretty stable. And that makes it so that it's not going to be slippery for people that are crossing it. And I've included the cost of each bridge on here. There's another, so there's two components. There's the bridge, and then there's this other thing that we talked about before called triax. And, you know, I don't think we need to approve them both together, but the triax is just a way to stabilize the trail. So these are pretty much all the same. I include the costs on each one. And I added up the cost. So it's going to be $30,260, not including any cost of any permitting or, you know, engineering or anything like that. And the Mass Trails grant will pay for 80% if you get approved. So it would just be a cost of $6,000 that would be privately funded. I think, so what I want to do now is apply for the grant because it's due January 31st. Then what we can do is we can, I think, proceed with the permitting. And then I don't think we need to wait to get approved for the grant. And then we could always, if all the permits come through, we could always do a few during the summer while we're waiting for the grant. If we don't get the grant, we can just fund those ourselves or reapply. Are there any questions about this project?
Not, well, for me, not at this point, because I think tonight we're basically just voting to say that it's something that it's okay to submit. Am I correct, Rebecca? We're voting to allow the submittal of an NOI from a special interest group. Is that our proper terminology? Go ahead.
So there are sort of two things that I was trying to highlight in the beginning, and Cindy had just highlighted it. So one is they need authorization to apply for the Mass Trails grant. So the authorization of the commission saying, yes, submit the notice of intent would also support the application to Mass Trails Grant for the funding for those projects. The other aspect of the authorization is that the commission is solely authorizing that you can move forward and submit the notice of intent for each of these projects. So the 9 projects, which breaks into the 3 notices of intent for each property. One item though to be aware of is, and the question to the commission is where it talks about the applicant and the property owner. If the commission wants, they can authorize me to assist this group, and therefore the commission would be submitting the notice of intent, or the special interest group would be submitting, and then we would still be listed as the property owner. The difference there is associated with the fees associated with the permitting. So where the town is exempt and it's occurring on town land and it's replacing existing in some circumstances, the town may want to apply and just work with the special interest group in that application. It still goes through the public hearing process. So in the past, that's what has occurred when the Girl Scouts come forward, or the Boy Scouts. In particular, the Annie Moore Boardwalk was done by the Girl Scouts, and Carol actually was the applicant on that. They came forward, same thing with their proposal, their time frame, and then Carol continued with the remainder of the paperwork and following up. But still during the public hearing process, that special interest group was there discussing and providing summary for it.
Okay.
I know that's a lot of information, a little confusing, but does that make sense?
It doesn't. It's almost similar to when we asked you to submit the NOI for the
Yes.
Taggart work, right?
Yep.
And it's probably the easiest and least expensive way for all parties involved here to move this forward.
Yep.
Okay.
I filled
Go
out the NOI just as a draft for Rebecca
Yes.
only, but I didn't submit it electronically. Yeah, and then in the Mass Trails application, there is a place where the property owner has to sign. So I think that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yes, and so that would actually be the town administrator. So part of the point of this authorization would be I can go to the town administrator and say, the commission authorized this group to apply for the grant for these projects on town land.
Gotcha. All right. Other commission members have thoughts, feelings, questions? Do you understand what the asks are?
I just want to say, I think that this is an incredible opportunity for our town and our conservation properties. And I think we'd be crazy to not consider this and to encourage Cindy and the other members of the group to proceed with the grant funding. I do think that is in terms of how the application is processed. I also think that if we were to ask Rebecca to work as the town and eliminate some of the permitting fees, I think that that would be a good idea. I think it would be a little unreasonable to have somebody proposing to donate time, materials to greatly improve our crossings on some of these conservation properties, which our town doesn't have a budget for. And then to turn around and ask them to pay fees to do it. I just think that's a little unreasonable. So I think that however we can waive those fees, if that means that Rebecca is functioning as or is working with the applicant, I think that that would be a good way to move forward. But again, I think this is an incredible opportunity for our town and our conservation land. I think there's a lot of crossings I know there's a lot of volunteer effort that goes in. We just don't have the money. We don't have the people. There's a lot of crossings that are completely dangerous. I've fallen on them before. I've walked across them with dogs that, that are 5 feet in the air, and they're terrifying. They have no railings. And I just think that this is an amazing opportunity that we really should work with this group to make happen. So.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
Regarding, I just want to circle back to the grant application, Cindy. So this project is not solely contingent upon the receipt of grant funds, or it is?
I think that if we didn't receive the grant funds, we wouldn't be able to do as many, but I would still be able to do as many as like I could afford on my own. Probably I would say, I could probably maybe not do 9, but maybe I could do, 4.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. The other thing I just want to clarify as well is through the notice of intent process, the commission is still able to provide feedback on materials used or the structures that are proposed. So in that, I agree with you. I think, and this is more a note for the commission, I think authorization is still supported, it sounds like, either way, but I think typically the grant programs like to see projects that are ready to go, which this authorization I think would support, but understanding that the total cost may waver a little bit depending on what the actual structure is approved. And in terms of materials being used and then the extent of work being used. But I certainly do appreciate that everything's been priced out to what you're proposing, but the commission will have another chance to comment on that and weigh in a little bit more specific to our regulations when that notice of intent is submitted.
And I forgot to mention, it's a reimbursement grant. So we have to pay first and then they reimburse 80%.
Any questions from members of the public? All right, and Bill, any additional questions for you or thoughts?
No, I'm also, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, excellent. So Rebecca, I would think we would need to if the commission were so inclined, I would think we would need to authorize you first to work with, I would imagine I have to come up with an entity's name,
I
or
would just say the Bolton Trails Committee because they are volunteers on Bolton Trails Committee.
Yep. So it would be authorizing you as our agent to work with the Bolton Trails Committee to submit 3 NOIs for work on town conservation land, work addressing crossings on town conservation land.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I can ask you for good wording for the second part of this. All right. So I'd like to call for a roll call vote for all those who are in favor of authorizing our town's conservation agent, Rebecca Longvall, to work with the Bolton Trails Committee for the purposes of submitting 3 NOIs dealing with crossings and maintenance on town-owned conservation land. All those in favor, please say aye. And I'll start with Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am an I myself.
Great, thank
and
you.
Then it was authorizing the submit, or what was the second half regarding the grant? Authorizing the submittal of
authorizing. So the town has to authorize the fact that this project is being proposed for grants because it's the town's land. So I think it's saying if the grant is accepted, the project can move forward. And it says in the grant that if you just have to know what permitting you need, you don't have to have the permitting in place. So I can submit it and then we can work on that. And they don't award it until August.
Okay.
So the authorization, Brian, would be to authorize the submittal of, or authorize the 9 crossings to be submitted to the Mass Trails Grant Program.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Mass Trails Grant Program.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to call a roll call vote to authorize the 9 crossings be submitted for the Mass Trails Grant Program. Right. All those in favor, please respond by saying aye, and we'll start with Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am, and I myself. Did I hit all the key points I need to hit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So Cindy, we will be in touch and be working together as we move forward on this. If you have a draft already of the Mass Trails Grant, please send it to me so that I can review it. And then if it's final, I can have the town administrator review it if he's the signee on it. And if he's not the authorizing signature and it's Brian, I will follow up with Brian.
Okay, I'm gonna be working on it. I haven't finished it yet, and I'll send it to you when it's done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Rebecca, any other updates this evening?
Just our usual couple. We already did the minutes, and I apologize, I did not write. Oh no, I did. We had a guided walk on Monday, December 20th at 12 p.m. We had one individual show up. It was sort of a guess on who would show up the week before the holiday during the day, but I am trying to provide some additional times to see if we get a different attendance. Then we have the MVP program. Again, this time it is the Nashua River Communities Resilient Lands Management Project. I was out all day before and after that guided walk on various sites throughout the town of Bolton and Clinton, our partner community, as we are looking at forested parcels and how they're managed and the differences between those forest types and diversity associated with them, along with the goals for each landowner. In the coming year, so early next year, which is coming around the corner, we will have a project website. So on that project website, it will be similar to the Apple Country project, where we'll be housing a lot of our information there. And we also have the volunteer land steward position still open. Please contact me if anyone is interested. And we actually did receive interest from someone who would like to participate on the Conservation Commission. So hopefully they will be attending one of our meetings, and then the commission can weigh in on whether they are voted into the commission or not, and we bring them to the select board. And that is all I have for today.
Excellent. Commission members, any new business? Nope.
No new
Hearing
business.
none. I guess I will like to make a motion that we, excuse me, I'd like to make a motion that we officially adjourn the Tuesday, December 21st meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second for adjourning?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Emily.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
And Rebecca, I am an aye as well. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's. Hope everybody has a lovely week, warm, restful, no injuries.
Recording stopped.
All that good stuff.
Don't jinx us, Brian.
I will try not to. I will try.
No
not.
injuries.
No injuries. That's a no trips to the hospitals. A
No
successful
ER
holiday
trips.
for us usually. Yeah.
That's right.
All right, well,
All right,
thank you
everybody.
all. Happy holidays.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Good night, you
Take care.
guys.
We'll see you.